Let me first say thanks for that introduction. I'm not always so popular. But I do want you to know that, we want to work with you. We really do. And we want to we're making the contracting process as easy as possible for you as well. So we want you to feel comfortable working with us. So it's not business as usual. We're trying a lot of creative things in contracting. So what is DARPA's goal? Well, first of all, we want to make things as fast and flexible for both the government team and the proposers. So when it's fast for you, it's fast for us, and that's the bottom line. We're trying to make things a lot more streamlined so we can attract commercial industry. We also employ a variety of different solicitation and contracts types, depending upon the audience that we're trying to attract. So we have a lot of variety, and we can use those techniques. So, and then the third point that I like to bring up is that back in the late 80s, DARPA was very concerned that we weren't attracting the best people to do work for us. I mean, not to say that the defense community was not a great community, it was. But we wanted to attract the commercial community that traditionally would never do business with the federal government. So, and I'll just throw out a few names like Intel or Cray Research and so forth. These companies, they would sell products, but they would not actually perform research for us. So we had to come up with another way of doing business, and it was a more commercial-like practice. And it eliminated a lot of the bureaucracy and typical inherent government contracting issues that were preventing them or were barriers to entry. So really, what we came up, in 1989, we were granted this authority called other transactions. And other transactions allowed us to operate in that more commercial-like fashion. So what is my office's goals? Well, we want to negotiate proposals for breakthrough technologies as fast as possible. It's very important to us. We want to make sure that the technologies get out there fast. So we can actually award contracts in 30 days or less. And to put that in context, you have to look at the traditional contracting community, and it's not uncommon that it could take as long as 6 months or longer to get that same effort in place. So depending upon the type of effort that we're working with, we can be very quick. Also, we're trying to lower barriers by simplifying the overall process. And as Jeff had said, we have a lot of funding. We have a lot of money to fund great ideas, and that's what we want to do. But I want you to know that contracting is not a barrier. And also, what's most important to me is that we're fair to all of you. We want to make sure that everyone is given an equal opportunity to participate, that we're actually spending the time to review your proposals. That's very important to us. And also, as I'm also the competition advocate for the agency, one thing you find about DARPA is we have many hats because we are so small. But DARPA traditionally has very high competition statistics, compared to the rest of the Department of Defense. So I'm very concerned that this process is fair. And then full and open competition is the way we do business. So let's talk a little bit about the award process. So depending upon the situation or the solution of the proposed team, there are lots of different award instruments that we use. And I will say that the traditional procurement contracts are governed by the Federal Acquisition Regulation, and this is the vast majority of what we do, even today. But we also have the ability to award grants and cooperative agreements. These types of instruments are used primarily for assistance and to advance, for public purposes. We use those grants. The only real difference between a grant and a cooperative agreement is that there's substantial involvement on the part of the government, either by management involvement, or it could be by working side by side on the bench, for example. But they're more support and stimulation activities, advance the state of the art, but we're not really looking for something directly for our benefit. So then the last two areas I talked about other transactions very briefly, which are technology investment agreements and other transactions for prototypes. Now, technology investment agreements are exactly what they say. We're making investments in the development of technology, and it's primarily dual-use technology development. And then the other areas are other transactions for prototypes, and these types of instruments are usually when we just have a prototype deliverable, but they have complete flexibility. So the last two instruments are commercial-like agreements. So just to give you things that you can do is that we have complete flexibility in the area of intellectual property. We have complete flexibility in the cost accounting practices, for example. You can operate the way you always do business. And also, you don't have to have property systems that are tied to government. You don't have to have subcontract systems. All the rules of the federal government, except those tied to appropriations, don't apply to you. So they're not governed by the Uniform Commercial Code, but they are commercial-like instruments, and we have a number of models that we use. So these instruments are great from your standpoint. They're designed to attract commercial participants that have traditionally never done business with the federal government, and they're great instruments to use. So, what is the most common solicitation type at DARPA? The most common solicitation type is the Broad Agency Announcement, or BAA. And basically, this is the main solicitation type for research and development, or more specifically, for science and technology agreements. And so really what we're trying to do is advance the state of the art. We are increasing knowledge, but these instruments are very unique from the regular federal procurement process. So one important point is there's no common statement of work. So what we do is we go out and we say, we have this research problem, and BTO will come up with some great ideas, and they'll say, hey, I got this problem out here. Tell me all your solutions to solve that problem. Well, we want your revolutionary approaches, all your breakthrough technologies. Tell us how you can solve that problem. But one very important point is that they're considered technical competition, but each proposal is evaluated on its own merit. It's not compared to other proposals, but it is considered technical competition. Think of it as a competition of ideas. So that's one characteristic of a BAA. Also, obviously, there's going to be varying technical approaches because we don't rack and stack proposals. We don't compare your proposals. But what happens is that the program managers who are doing the selection and so forth, and the team will look at what particular proposals are going to provide the best solution to that overall problem. So we don't look at things like whether they were excellent or good. We look at whether they're selectable or not selectable. And it's really as simple as that. Also, communication. This is very unique in the federal procurement process. I don't know if any of you have ever worked with RFPs. You may not have at all. But communication can occur all the way up until submission of the proposal. So we're not going to give you the solution, of course, to the problem, but we can talk to you, up to the point of your proposal submission. And that really allows for better proposals. And then the next thing is white papers. White papers are very interesting because they're really intended to minimize a lot of unnecessary effort on the part of you guys out there. So what they do is there's a much shortened version of a proposal, and they allow you to get your ideas across, but also not spend a tremendous amount of money. And that's very important. We know that it costs a lot of money to prepare proposals and a lot of time. So if your ideas are not really of interest to DARPA or really doesn't fit our mission, then we can tell you that, and then you can still submit the proposal. It's still your option, but that's your thought. I mean, if you want to do that and you want to go spend the resources, that's fine. But we want to minimize your effort. Also, we'll have industry days where the program managers brief the programs themselves. So what that does is it allows for an exchange of ideas as well, but it really helps to clarify the program. And it also allows for feedback from the participants to see whether we need to make changes to that BAA. And the types of BAAs that we use, okay, the vast majority of what we're using are program-specific BAAs, and they're issued throughout the year. They have specific cutoff dates, but they're very program-specific. And you've heard a lot of those programs today. But we also have, what is very unique, are 2 year-long BAAs, and they're more general scope. And what these BAAs, we call one an open office BAA, which is the first one. And basically it's to cover ideas that cover the general office areas of BTO, for example. But what they're typically used are things we call seedlings. And seedlings are used really to get across concepts and so forth. So they're concept studies. But they can also be used for larger dollar efforts as well. And next, and I know that Arthi had talked about this the first day, is we just started a BTO Easy BAA, and that's kind of a typical word that we use. It's not quite as easy as it's easy, but I will say one thing. It's designed to attract commercial industry participants. One very good thing about it is that, for example, white papers are 2 pages long. That's all they are, 2 pages. Proposals are 20 pages long. I mean, so it's not really that complex. And then the whole solicitation itself is only 25 pages long. So what we've also done is taken sample procurement contracts and other transactions and allowed you to go ahead and access those to see what you might prefer to go. You may decide to go with a procurement contract, and that's perfectly okay. And other participants, you don't have to be a non-traditional, can participate as well, but that's primarily who we're trying to attract. And one thing I will say back about the flexibility that you have in intellectual property, I know that that's a big concern to companies, and I could be up here hours talking about intellectual property, but I would bore you to tears. But the point is that with intellectual properties, when we negotiate intellectual property, we're not interested in taking your technology. That's not our goal. But what we want to do is make sure that you commercialize that technology and get it out in the market. That's very important to us. So when we go in negotiation, don't be thinking that we're trying to take your rights, because we're not. And we want to make sure that you're comfortable with that as well. That's the end of my presentation. I will be available for one-on-ones, but I want to thank you.
If any of you have questions for Scott, please feel free to ask. Scott, I want you to go back into the issue of IP again. I mean, that's one that a lot of people worry about. And I want you to really be a little bit more specific in the point that you made, that number one is, we're not interested in your IP. We're the government. Why the hell would we be interested in your IP? The second thing is, I want you to be more clear than that. And then the second one is, the second one is, in fact, what you were talking about in terms of what we really want is for you to have the pathway to commercialization, please.
Right. Well, we know that there are various commercial scenarios that are out there that are very important to you as a community. So, for example, I mean, some of the things that we can negotiate is that we can negotiate extensions of rights, for example, so that typically what happens in intellectual property is that the government never takes title to inventions. What they do is we actually retain a royalty-free license to the technology. And the key words are for government purposes. So it's not for commercial purposes, it's just for government purposes. But there are occasions where we'll use that flexibility, for example, is that if through economies of scale and all kinds of things, it may be more feasible for you to use intellectual property in a different way. But also, say that you need both markets, for example, to get a return on your investment. One of the things that we can do is delay taking rights to, and that means a license right to the technology, delay it until you can get a return on investment that's satisfactory to you. And that's fine. We can delay rights, we can do all kinds of things. We can actually only take march-in rights, which are the ability to go in and take the technology if that company is not going to do something with that particular IP. So it's very important for us to get the technology out to the market. That's very important to us. But again, in the traditional world, you really can't, there's not a lot of flexibility in intellectual property. I don't want to put a lot of fear involved in there because we only have government rights. And oftentimes that's fine, for a lot of the community. But sometimes there's a market considerations and you need both areas. So that kind of helps a little bit. Any other questions? Or? Yes.
I'm here representing a nonprofit organization.
Stand by, sir.
Thank you. I'm here representing a nonprofit organization. Bit unusual, perhaps, but
not really.
So, well, that's my question. So, many of our members are scientists, engineers, biologists, but also I'm a computer scientist, for example. Does DARPA contract with entities like that, or how would our members? How would I promote? the idea of working with you guys to our members?
Sure. Well, we do contracting with a lot of nonprofits. You know, we can.
We're not a university. I mean, not like that
No,
kind.
no, that's okay. I mean, I've dealt with companies like the Semiconductor Industry Association and so forth, and they come to us with great ideas as well. I mean, typically what we try and award are grants, but sometimes we've used things called, you know, the other transactions that I mentioned, and but that's not, you know, the fact that you're a nonprofit has nothing to do with whether, you know, you can work for us or not. A lot of great ideas come out of nonprofits. So you just follow the same solicitation process, and you would go ahead and look up, and we use our solicitation process, which is the Federal Business Opportunities. And so therefore, you know, if you look through those announcements, you can respond directly to our solicitations as well.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Hi. So I have a question about data that you guys fund
Yes.
that for us to generate as an example. So the NIH, if it funds the creation of some kind of data, will require that that data be made publicly available through one of its databases. And I'm wondering if you guys have a stance on that.
That's a iffy question. I mean, we may actually require you to publish it, but that's primarily universities that want to publish everything anyway. But if you're a commercial company, we don't necessarily require you to publish anything, particularly if there's substantial investments on your part as well. And we're not going to go ahead and take your technology and then require you to publish it. So we can be completely flexible on data rights, computer software rights, all those rights we can be completely flexible with you.
In a similar vein to the first question, could you comment briefly on your ability to work with non-US citizens and organizations?
Sure. Well, short answer is we can work with anyone, but we don't work with anybody on the sanctioned list. So, I mean, obviously North Korea, you know, that wouldn't be very career enhancing, you know. I think that's kind of like a clause that I saw recently that I found ridiculous, but prohibition on contracting with the enemy. But it seemed to me that would be kind of logical. But anyway, they have to, that's how the government is. It's very process oriented. And I will say that's the difference really with DARPA, is that we're very mission focused. You know, we're not process oriented. But clearly I've worked deals with a lot of foreign companies. Either contracts, or we've used other transactions with them as well. So, and what we find is that foreign companies particularly, they love to use other transactions because, you know, they can pretty much lay out a deal that's very similar to a commercial-like agreement for them. And so those, you know, I think you may have mentioned it, we work with Novartis and Sanofi or something like that, yeah. So anyway, we've actually done deals with foreign governments before, believe it or not, with Singapore. Actually, Singapore likes to use it's kind of a cooperative agreement that we work with. I would say it's with the university. They usually work through the University of Singapore there, National University of Singapore. Also worked with companies like Defense Science and Technology Organization, which is really our counterpart in Australia, for example. You have to be kind of careful with the international arrangements because, you know, they're coming in and doing work for us. You know, these aren't international cooperation efforts because there's a whole new set of rules that comply with that you have to comply with. So, but they're coming in, just like anybody else, and they say, I got this great idea, would you want to fund it? Even if it comes from a foreign government. We've done deals with the Swedish government, we've done deals with the Australians, so perfectly okay. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I've got a question over here.
Oops, wait, okay.
Just one, mine will be quick.
Okay.
Sorry, so I just have a question about the mechanics of
Yes.
the contracts. In the past, I've worked with companies that have not really been keen on government contracts, and you know, for two particular reasons. One is the federal acquisition regulations,
Regulation,
and
right.
you get 10 pages of those, and you say
Right.
no. And then the other one is putting in separate accounting and timekeeping systems and such like to manage the government money that you're actually receiving, and often that presents a significant barrier to actually participating in these programs. So is DARPA different in that respect?
Well, if you're doing a standard procurement contract, for example, example, they are governed by the Federal Acquisition Regulation. So we're not different in that regard. However, when you're talking about using other transactions, we have complete flexibility in that area. So we allow you to use your own accounting practices. And it looks very similar to a commercial agreement. But you know, there's trade-offs, and you have to decide which route is the best for you to go with. But clearly, you know, other transactions really allow that flexibility. The Federal Acquisition Regulation, I can't help you on all the clauses that have to go in there, because even I have a hard time with half the clauses that go in there. But you know, that's why DARPA is a wonderful place, because top management really supports you to be creative. But as Jeff said earlier, we have to stay within the law. You know, that's very important to us. I really don't want to end up, you know, in trouble later on. So I am careful. Actually, contracting officers are the only profession in the government that are personally liable for their actions. So I'm particularly careful about that. But we are creative. So clearly, we have the ability to do that. We encourage you to use these alternate vehicles. Actually, I promote them everywhere I go, basically, because I don't think they're used enough. And I think because the rest of the contracting community is just a little bit fearful of using them, because there aren't a lot of rules and regulations associated with it. But you don't have to have time card systems, for example. I mean, I've done deals with companies where we just looked at a percentage of time that was dedicated to the effort, for example. So, I mean, not everybody has time cards. So, does that answer everything? Or? Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Scott. Thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
In your presentation, I saw a couple references to specific BAAs that we could go search for.
Right.
I'm wondering if you could describe a bit the type of database it sounds like exists and how we go about searching through that for the various solicitations and BAAs that might be ongoing right now.
Well, typically, once we publish through the Federal Business Opportunities, and it's www.fbo.gov, and you just look under DARPA and you can find all of our solicitations. However, you can also go to the DARPA website, which is www.darpa.mil, and if you look through that system and you go through the solicitations page, you can see it for each office, you know, which solicitations are active out there to respond directly to. So that they are available. You know, sometimes you might see them in a journal here and there because somebody has expanded. You know, we really probably need to do a better job, quite frankly, of getting the word out there to everyone. But those are the government sources that we have. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And we're required to use.
And Scott, we also announce them on our Twitter feed.
Oh, okay. Well, that's news to me, but no, that's good. Great. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, actually, to everybody that organized this. It's been phenomenal. My question is, as someone who is learning a lot about the kinds of things that are coming out of DARPA, you know, historically very impressive things, and now a lot of the things that we're working on now equally so potentially impactful. So how do people find out about the technologies that are coming out of these innovative efforts in a responsible way that would allow for a collaboration to deliver on these on the futures that could be? You know, we know about the DISTAR platforms, but and besides meetings like this, where you really get a download of all the amazing things that are going on, what other ways are there for us as innovators to have these, you know, experiments sprinkled in our minds so we can think about and percolate what could happen?
Well, I know that DARPA does a very good job of promoting, and that one of these, this conference obviously is doing that, telling you everything that's going on within BTO. Now, a lot of the program managers try to go to conferences and they try and tell about their program, not just in BTO, but all over the entire organization. So a lot of that gets out that way, quite frankly. And a lot of it has to do with because the program managers have a relationship with that community as well. So I know that's not a perfect solution to the problem, but I mean, to getting the word out, but really the best way that we can tell you is that, you know, we don't really publish advanced notification of BAAs. So we go ahead and everything is posted within Federal Business Opportunities and our Twitter feed and other vehicles, but you know, that's really it. You really kind of have to have your eye close to the, you know, check the website every occasion, and you'll be okay. We keep BAAs open for a minimum of 45 days. So, but they could be longer depending upon the program. So you generally should have time if you're checking back, with our web page. But it's not, that's outreach activities. That's a lot of different things, and we try and do that. But again, I have that problem in terms of getting that out to the community, particularly in the IT area, for example, when you're trying to get to the hackerspace community. I mean, how do you get to these guys that are, small boutique companies and so forth? They're not looking at the DARPA website. So,
Hey, Scott?
Yes.
Can I make a comment? This is Chuck over here.
Yeah.
Hey, to that question, about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, DARPA stood up an office called the Adaptive Execution Office, and it's a very broad title for an office that has lots of flexibility. What I offer to you is that if you haven't seen something that you're working on in a BAA, if you don't have a formal solicitation, if you want to know if DARPA is working in that particular field, to contact me or contact somebody in my office, charles.wolf@darpa.mil. If you've got a white paper that you need passed around the agency, if you've got technologies that you've seen that you think may be redundant or complementary, or if you're looking for an end user pool, our office is responsible for fielding not just the DARPA technologies, but for those other top technologies that advance national security. So we've got a lot of flexibility in our office. We're now geographically oriented. So if you look at the military structure with the combatant commands, we've got a representative who now covers the Pacific, representative who covers NORTHCOM and STRATCOM, representative who covers SOUTHCOM and CENTCOM, and then we've got others that work interagency. There's probably about 70 organizations that our office touches. So really, if you've got interest in something that's going on at DARPA that you didn't see on the webpage, contact us, AEO, and we'll ferret it out for you. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Chuck.
You guys, you raised a very good point, though, is how do we get the message out, right? And we're trying our best. We're trying our best. So we have Twitter now, we've got our website, blah, 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 blah. But that's clearly insufficient. So this is, again, where this kind of a meeting is incredibly helpful to us, is you guys can think of ways that we can better get our message out. Please let us know. It is very important for us to get our message out. We're not reaching everybody that we need to reach. The only thing that I will tell you is that we are obligated under fair and open competition to do exactly what Scott said, exactly what Chuck said, is to open up folks and let us know that what we are currently have open for solicitation, the open BAA. We have an easy BAA and the open BAA, which is basically says that we're open to any and all ideas to come to us. But then again, what you want to know is what are the PMs thinking about in terms of what they're creating as the next thing, because that's where the opportunity space lies, right? Is what is Wattendorf thinking about? What is Gallivan thinking of, and blah blah blah, in terms of their new starts, so that you can find out what their interest area is, so you can hurry up and show them your innovative ideas. What Chuck offered you was really remarkable, because that is actually agency-wide. I mean, Captain Wolf is really very good in this aspect, is that they're tied into all the offices. So what you have may not necessarily be relevant to BTO, but it may be relevant to ITO or TTO, the other DARPA offices. And that is the reason why Captain Wolf has offered you this opportunity space. But it still comes down to this. There has to be a little bit of proactivity on your side, a little proactivity on our side. So if you have a great idea, contact the program manager. I mean, that's really what you want to do. But if you're not sure who the program manager is, then Captain Wolf and his folks are clearly the right people to interact with. We want to work with you. You hear that from Scott, you hear that from Chuck, you hear that from Alicia, you hear that from me. We're very serious about this at all levels. So entrepreneurs, for example, are saying, how do I get in the system? I mean, I don't really want funding from you to go and do a technology, but I believe that I can help some of the technology that's being developed transition to the commercial space. Again, that's where we need you to reach out to us, because we don't know everybody in that space. Reach out to Chuck, reach out to Alicia, reach out to me, reach out to Scott, and we will try to do the eHarmony thing and put you guys together. That's the point, or the VC and the PEs. We want to work with you. And even though you're not asking us for money, you're offering your services. That is incredibly important to us. You have no idea how important that is to us. I mean, I'm a government puke, Chuck is a government puke. I mean, we don't know how to get things into the commercial space. We need your help. So again, it's this open communication, open dialogue. We have a policy in BTO, and that is every email from somebody has to be answered at least once. All right, so if your email to me is like, you're trying to take over my brain from the microwave towers, I'm only going to answer you one time, but you're not going to like how I'm going to answer you. But the point is that we answer every single email at least once, all right? And that, I think that's actually a good policy. Because if you think about the rest of the federal government, you may not get answered at all. But every single program manager that you ping, somebody on his or her team, whether it's, will answer you at least once, all right? And that, I think, is very, very, we can promise you that. We can absolutely promise you that. And that is what I'm saying was an open door. And I know what you guys are thinking. Well, what does that mean? But you wouldn't believe the kind of emails that we get. Maybe you could, because you probably get the same yourselves. But the point is we want to interact with you. But if you have a better way for us to be, to let you know what we're thinking about, we'll do our very best. But it has to be done in the spirit of open competition and open access to all, right? So it can't be, you just tell me the secret. That's not going to happen.
Also, I will say that, Jeff talked on, I talked about the Open Office BAA. So, you can always send it in an abstract, so you always have the ability to do that. It's going to cost you a lot of money to do it, but you can get your idea across and you'll make sure it's reviewed. And by the way, it's available in every technical office that we have. Every technical office has an Open Office BAA. So you can use that as well.
The white paper is huge. Make no mistake, the white paper is very, very important. Why is that? Because every white paper that comes in is automatically logged in and tracked. And because of that, we actually have a policy at DARPA that every white paper, every proposal has to be acted on in a certain amount of time. There's actually a ding against the program managers if they don't act on a white paper or a proposal, but it has to come in through the BAA process. It can't be just some email. Some email, you know how that gets, it gets lost and whatever. But the point is, if it comes in, it is actually logged in, it's actually at that point tracked and shepherded. That's a very important point. It's not just, stamped. There's actually a shepherd. In our office, it's David Swan. David Swan's job is to shepherd every white paper, every proposal that comes through, and he will just plague the program managers to make sure that they read it and they act on it. That is absolutely a requirement at DARPA, that it must be acted on, but it has to come in through that system because the only way it's tracked. It's actually positive for you too, because when your idea comes in, we are bound by non-disclosure. We're totally bound by non-disclosure. But it does something else. You get actually a date and time stamp of your idea coming to the federal government. And that is very, very useful. That is very, very useful. You may find it very useful later on. But the point is that use that white paper. It's meant as exactly what Scott said. If it is taking you 5 days to write a white paper, then there's something that's clear to me. You should be able to write it on the flight home tonight, right? I mean, really, it should be a 2-pager. We don't give a rat's ass about preliminary data, and this is what Joe Blow said back in Poland. We could care less. It's your idea. Rough idea of what it is, what the impact is, and how much cash you're asking for. Just a swag, all right? And by the way, the last point is other transactional authority, contract, blah, 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 blah. Get your idea to us first. We'll discuss what the mechanisms are after, all right? But what I wanted you to hear from Scott was there are many mechanisms that we can work through. If your idea is reasonable to us, rational to us, we want to do it, then Scott comes and his team swoop in, and they'll help you determine what is the best contract vehicle. And there's many, 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 many. You don't decide up front. The only thing you need to decide up front is this an idea worthy that you want to send to us and engage with us? We'll work with you, and Scott's team will work with you later on what is the best vehicle to get the cash to you. That's the point. Any other questions? Please.
What's a major difference between contract and grant? At NIH, NSF, only grants, you have some contract.
Well, the real difference is that I'll give you the standard definition. I mean, of a contract is you use them when you're buying goods or services for the direct benefit of the government. It's kind of a gray area, to be honest with you, because it could be a report that's delivered, and you're going to have the same thing under a grant. But the difference is that generally speaking, there are different rights associated with that. I mean, not necessarily from a patent or area, but particularly on the intellectual, on the technical data side of the house. But typically, with grants, what we're doing, and I personally like to give them to universities because they're easier to negotiate than a procurement contract, but they're really designed to support and stimulate. We're trying to advance the technology and the state of the art for a public purpose. Normally, most of that technology, all that technology, particularly with universities, is published. It's out there in the open market space. Whereas that's not always the case under a contract. Generally, there's some concerns about protecting data. There's not a rush to publish, for example. So they're really what we call them assistance instruments. We're assisting universities and nonprofits that want to publish. We're trying to advance the state of the art, and anyone has access to that data later on. Whereas it's not always the case in a procurement contract. But although oftentimes we will do a procurement contract with universities and nonprofits, if they're hardware deliverables, if the purpose is to deliver a prototype or something along those lines, and that's the primary purpose, then you can't use a grant, basically. But as you're familiar with NIH, it's doing the research, it's publishing, it's getting the technology out there, and that's really the difference. Yes.
Yeah. My name is Martin Sierhuis. First, as a small company, I want to thank you for supporting, small companies in doing this. We have a grant from you guys, and it's wonderful. But there is also this issue of larger companies, especially research institutes of larger companies. I also represent an automotive company, and the researchers there, automotive companies don't think about biology and cars that easily.
Right.
So they're not the ones that are going to easily submit to something like BTO, because they don't think that A, you will fund large companies, and so the question, and B, whether it's relevant of what they're doing. So my question to you is like, would you encourage even large institutions to apply for funding, or?
Absolutely. Well, we do a lot of deals with larger companies. I mentioned a few with Intel and Hewlett-Packard and so forth. These companies had never done business with the federal government. Their first entry with the federal government was with us in terms of doing R&D. So we're not limiting to anyone. And I will say that the larger companies are much more difficult to negotiate, and particularly intellectual property. Those can be rather painful. But, and a lot of it's based on fear, quite frankly. It's not, they can't quite grasp the concept that we just have government purpose rights. We're not interested in commercial rights. But by and large, they're usually the nicest people to negotiate with, but they're also the toughest. So large companies, small companies. See, what I've never liked, quite frankly, and I'm just giving you my philosophy here, is that I've never liked, when I first started in the government almost 30 years now, there wasn't any alternate vehicle. We had to force small businesses into signing up to contracts they really didn't understand. And that bothered me. It always bothered me. And so, I wanted them to have the ability to operate the way they've always done business, because granted, you're fine. As long as nothing goes wrong with the actual effort, you're fine. Nothing happens, and it'll just go along. But when they finally, if something doesn't go quite right, then their government covers every aspect, under those types of instruments. And I don't want to discourage you, because most of the time they're fine. But at the same time, I never liked forcing small businesses into doing business the federal government way. So, and I'm not saying that maybe not too popular, but with some of my colleagues in other areas, but I believe that the other transactions really afford the ability, for you to operate the way you've always wanted to operate. But large businesses, clearly, they can participate. I've learned a lot. I actually learned intellectual property from 3M, unbeknownst to them, but because they have a whole office that, or actually a whole company that just deals with the intellectual property. So.
For those of you who have additional questions with Scott, you can register to speak with Scott on the one-on-ones right outside at the desk, okay? So any of you, there's open spots there, so if you have specific questions for Scott, just go ahead and do it. Again, I want to take this opportunity to thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you all for... I want to thank you all for, again, participating with us. We're really, again, this was our first attempt at doing this. We want to do this again in New York. We plan on doing one in Boston, one down in La Jolla, and so on and so forth. We're trying to create a community, and we started here, of course. So I asked some of you, particularly Keith, to go ahead and give me feedback on how you think this might be better. Because again, we are DARPA, we want to do it right. And so please, you guys in the audience, feel free to email me, tell me how you think it might be better and how we can reach out with certain groups maybe we have not reached out to sufficiently, and so on and so forth. The one-on-one sessions will begin in the Spectrum Ballroom. So I ask you to assemble there about 5 minutes prior to your appointment with a particular PM. But until that time comes, we have a break until 11:20 when this all begins again. But this is our last opportunity to meet as a group, and I want to thank you again all. Really, truly, we are very thankful to you for participating with us.